You're on a road trip, somewhere in the middle of America. It's getting dark. Your phone says there's a town a few miles ahead. Small, quiet, the kind of place you wouldn't think twice about. But some towns aren't what they look like from the highway. Some have air that can hurt you slowly. Some have systems that failed and never came back. And some change the moment you take the wrong turn. And in every one of these places, the people who live there will tell you the same thing. You should know this before you stop. Beaumont, Texas. Most dangerous things announce themselves. Beaumont doesn't. It sits in southeast Texas, surrounded by oil refineries, chemical storage tanks, and processing facilities. This region, known as the Golden Triangle, is one of the most heavily industrialized corridors in the entire country. From the highway, it looks like any other mid-sized working-class city. Nothing that would make you slow down. Then you step outside your car. The smell hits you first, metallic, chemical. Sometimes almost sweet, but in a way that doesn't feel right. The kind of sweet that makes your brain say something is wrong here before you can name what it is. Air quality reports have raised repeated concerns about this area for years. Industrial flares light up the night sky. Emissions drift across residential neighborhoods. Particulate matter and chemical compounds that don't disappear when the wind changes direction. For people who live here, this isn't breaking news. It's the background of daily life. The thing about Beaumont is that the danger is cumulative, not sudden. There's no single moment that stops you, no obvious warning sign on the side of the road. It's the kind of risk that builds over months and years, the kind you only fully understand in retrospect. One longtime resident described it plainly. You don't notice it while you're here. You notice it when you leave for a few weeks and your lungs feel different. Then you come back, and within a day, you remember exactly what you'd been breathing. That's the warning from Beaumont. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet, persistent truth about what's in the air. Niagara Falls, New York. Every year, millions of tourists come here. They stand at the edge of one of the world's most famous natural wonders. They take photos, they post them, they leave. And they never see the other half of the city. A few blocks from the falls, the souvenir shops disappear. The crowds thin out. Boarded storefronts replace gift shops, and the streets go quiet in a way that doesn't match the thundering water just behind you. Niagara Falls, New York was once a booming industrial city. Factories, chemical plants, a working waterfront that employed thousands of people. Then the industry left, and it didn't go quietly. This is also the site of Love Canal. If you don't know that name, here's the short version. A residential neighborhood was built on top of buried industrial chemical waste. Families raised children there for years without knowing. When the contamination became impossible to ignore, the government stepped in, and an entire community had to be evacuated. The health consequences lasted decades. That history sits underneath everything in Niagara Falls, New York, sometimes literally. Today, the divide is hard to look away from. One side of the city draws millions of visitors and hundreds of millions in tourism dollars. A few streets away, neighborhoods that most of those visitors will never enter have struggled for generations. Someone who grew up here described it this way. People come for the falls. They see the water, they take their pictures, and they go home. They have no idea what the rest of this city looks like, and nobody's rushing to show them. Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson is the capital of Mississippi. It's supposed to be the stable one, the center of state government, the city with the resources, the infrastructure, the institutions, which is what made 2022 so difficult to process. That August, severe flooding overwhelmed Jackson's main water treatment plant. The system, already aging, already underfunded, already operating under pressure, failed. Tens of thousands of people lost access to safe running water, not for a day, for weeks. In some areas, the full recovery took months. No drinking water, no water to cook with. In some homes, not even enough pressure to flush a toilet. Imagine turning on your tap and nothing comes out. Bottled water was trucked in, national media covered it, the governor declared an emergency. And eventually, the immediate crisis passed. But the underlying problem didn't. Crime has also been a concern here for years. But for many residents, that's not even what worries them most anymore. Because crime is something you can see coming. A failing system isn't. Jackson's infrastructure has been under strain for decades. A shrinking tax base, aging pipes well past their lifespan. A backlog of repairs the city simply couldn't afford. The 2022 failure wasn't a surprise to people who had been paying attention. It was the result of years of slow, quiet strain. A resident who lived through it said, "You take water for granted until the day you turn on the tap and there's nothing there. Then you realize how fragile everything is, and you start wondering what else is one bad storm away from failing." That's the warning from Jackson. Not what you see, what you assume will always work until it doesn't. Wilmington, Delaware. Wilmington has a particular kind of deception built into its geography. It sits between Philadelphia and Baltimore, at the center of one of the wealthiest business corridors on the East Coast. Major banks, corporate headquarters, some of the most business-friendly tax laws in the country. Billions of dollars move through this city every single day. From the highway, those glass towers on the skyline look like prosperity. They're not for everyone. Just blocks from those corporate towers, certain neighborhoods have struggled for decades with concentrated poverty, underfunded schools, and persistent violent crime. Despite Wilmington's relatively small population, its homicide rate has repeatedly ranked among the highest per capita in the entire nation. That's not a small distinction. That's a number that stops researchers cold. The wealth here doesn't circulate through the city, it passes through and gets walled off. You can exit I-95 for gas. Look up at the logos of Fortune 500 companies glowing on the horizon, and be standing less than a mile from streets where the violent crime rate has historically been triple the national average. That gap between what the skyline suggests and what some of those blocks deliver is what makes Wilmington genuinely unsettling for people who don't know the city. It doesn't look dangerous. That's exactly the problem. The city has two faces, and the highway only shows you one of them. Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Pine Bluff used to be a destination. In the first half of the 20th century, this was one of the most economically active cities in Arkansas. Rail lines ran through it. Timber, agriculture, and manufacturing sustained it. Downtown was full. People moved here for work. That version of Pine Bluff is gone now. And what makes it painful to hear locals describe is how gradual the loss was. Not a single collapse, but a long, slow erosion. A factory closes. A few businesses follow, families leave. The tax base shrinks, which means services get cut, which makes things harder, which means more families leave. By the time most people noticed how bad it had gotten, there wasn't much left to build from. Today, Pine Bluff's violent crime rate sits at roughly 1,650 incidents per 100,000 residents, nearly 5 times the national average. Poverty hovers near 37%. Public safety budgets have been strained for years. Walk through parts of the old downtown and you'll find block after block of empty storefronts, buildings that have been shuttered for decades, streets that feel like they're waiting for something that isn't coming. A longtime resident put it plainly, "It didn't fall apart all at once, it just slowly disappeared." And the worst part is, by the time you really understood how bad it was, there wasn't enough left to save. Pine Bluff isn't a city in crisis. It's a city that has already been through the crisis. What's left is what survived. Clairton, Pennsylvania. Clairton is easy to overlook. A small town along the Monongahela River, just south of Pittsburgh. Modest homes, quiet streets, the kind of place that doesn't make headlines. But Clairton is home to one of the largest coke manufacturing plants in the United States, a massive industrial facility that has operated here for over a century. And on certain days, the town knows it. A thick haze settles over the valley, a smell that residents recognize immediately, sulfurous, industrial, impossible to ignore. Air quality monitors in this region have repeatedly recorded some of the highest pollution readings in the state. Particulate matter, sulfur compounds, emissions that hang in the air long after the wind shifts. This is different from Beaumont. In Beaumont, the danger is mostly invisible. In Clairton, residents can see it, smell it, feel it on bad days. And most of them have made a complicated peace with it. The plant means jobs, has meant jobs for generations. Families built their lives here around that work. Leaving isn't simple when your history is rooted in a place. But the cost is real. One resident described a bad morning this way. "Before I even open the door, I know what kind of day it's going to be. You can feel it in your chest. It's just part of living here. You stop questioning it after a while." That's probably the scariest part. In Clairton, the danger isn't hidden. It's just been lived with for so long that it stopped feeling like danger. Stockton, California. In the mid-2000s, Stockton was one of the fastest growing cities in California. Affordable homes, new subdivisions, people from the Bay Area moving inland, stretching their dollars, building something. the energy of a city that felt like it was finally getting its moment. Then 2008 happened. When the housing market collapsed, Stockton absorbed the impact harder than almost anywhere else in the country. Foreclosures spread block by block. Home values dropped so fast that families who had bought at the peak found themselves owing more than their homes would ever be worth again. Entire neighborhoods that had been full went empty within a year. Vacancy attracts problems. As jobs disappeared and families left, crime rates climbed sharply. Streets that had felt like the beginning of something became something else entirely. In 2012, Stockton became the largest American city in history to file for municipal bankruptcy. A resident who watched it unfold said, "There was no slow burn. One year, everything felt like it was moving forward. The next year, half my street was empty. I'd wake up and another house would have a foreclosure notice on it. It felt like the city was disappearing around me in real time." Stockton has worked to recover since then, and parts of the city have genuinely improved. But the speed of the collapse, how fast a growing, optimistic place can become something unrecognizable, is what stays with people, and why locals still carry that wariness with them even years later. Adel, Georgia. Most places on this list have a story you can trace. A closed factory, a failed infrastructure system, a crime statistic attached to a specific cause. Adel is different. Most places on this list have a story you can trace. A closed factory, a failed infrastructure system, a crime statistic attached to a specific cause. Adel is different. Adel is harder to explain. Adel is a feeling. People who live here have said, "So close to hell, you can feel the flames." It sounds like exaggeration, until you're there. Adel sits just off Interstate 75 in southern Georgia, gas stations, motels, a few fast food signs visible from the highway. The kind of exit you'd barely register on a long drive south. But travelers who've stopped here describe the same thing repeatedly across years of accounts online and in conversation. Something feels wrong. The streets go quiet after dark in a way that doesn't feel peaceful. There's a stillness that's harder to define than a crime rate. Fewer lights on than you'd expect, fewer people outside. A particular kind of silence that makes you want to get back in your car. It's not something you can put in a spreadsheet, but it's consistent enough and reported by enough different people that it's hard to dismiss. One driver who stopped late one night wrote about it afterward. "I've pulled off in a lot of small towns on long drives. Adel is the only one where I genuinely counted the minutes until I could leave. I've thought about it a lot since, and I still can't explain exactly what it was. I just knew I didn't want to be there." There's a quote that circulates about this town that it feels so close to something dark you can almost sense it. It sounds like exaggeration, until you've been there after dark. Then it sounds like someone trying to warn you. Camden, New Jersey. Camden is 3 minutes from Philadelphia. You can stand on the waterfront and see the skyline across the Delaware River, the skyscrapers, the bridge, one of the major American cities right there. Close enough that on a clear day you can read the signs. Then you turn around. For decades, Camden has ranked among the most dangerous cities in the United States. At its worst points, it held the #1 position. The statistics are severe, but statistics don't capture what makes Camden genuinely unsettling to navigate. The danger here isn't concentrated in one area you can identify and avoid. It's granular. It moves block by block, and the blocks don't always signal what they are before you're already in them. One street looks relatively normal, cars parked in driveways, someone walking a dog, the ordinary texture of a neighborhood. The very next block is completely different, windows boarded, lots cleared, a silence that feels less like quiet and more like absence. There is no obvious line between those two worlds, no sign, no clear marker that tells you when you've crossed from one to the other. Someone who spent significant time in Camden described it this way. The part people don't understand is that it's not one bad neighborhood you know to stay out of. It's the fact that you can be fine, and then you take 3 wrong turns because you're looking at your phone, and suddenly everything around you is telling you that you made a mistake. And you don't always get that warning until it's too late. That's what makes Camden different from cities with reputations for being rough. It's not the scale, it's the invisibility of the boundary. You can walk straight into it without ever seeing the line you crossed. Gary, Indiana. Some cities decline slowly. Gary, Indiana fell completely. At its peak, this was one of the most important industrial cities in the Midwest. The steel mills here employed tens of thousands of workers. Entire neighborhoods were built around the rhythm of factory shifts, the hours, the paychecks, the community that forms when a city has a single clear purpose and everyone is part of it. Then the American steel industry collapsed. Not declined, not restructured. Collapsed. Jobs disappeared faster than anything could replace them. Families left, then more families left. Then entire blocks went empty and stayed that way, not for a year or two, but for decades. Buildings that had been homes, storefronts, churches, social clubs left to deteriorate slowly, season after season, with no one coming back to maintain them. Today, parts of Gary look like a city that was evacuated and simply never returned. Blocks of abandoned houses being slowly reclaimed by vegetation. A downtown frozen somewhere in the early 1970s, the sign still mounted above businesses that haven't operated in 40 years. Entire streets where you can drive for blocks without seeing a single occupied building. It's not just the visual decay that unsettles people, it's the scale of it. The sense that what you're looking at isn't a neighborhood that struggled, it's a city that was and then stopped being. But Gary's reputation isn't only about what it looks like. It's about what people say. Talk to enough people who have driven through Gary, truck drivers who use I-90, travelers who've passed through, people who grew up in nearby towns, and you hear the same advice repeated with the same quiet certainty. Don't stop. Not for gas, not for directions, not to check your phone. Lock your doors and keep driving. Gary posts some of the highest per capita violent crime rates of any city in the United States. The combination of extreme poverty, near total economic collapse, and decades of population loss has produced something that doesn't have a clean name. It's not just a dangerous city. It's a city that feels, to the people who pass through it, like a warning about what happens when everything fails at once. The industry, the tax base, the institutions, the hope. One person who grew up in a town nearby said, "Gary isn't somewhere you accidentally end up. But if you do, if you take a wrong exit or your GPS sends you through there, every instinct you have will tell you the same thing the moment you realize where you are. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just get through it and get out."